Gopi Jana Palapa Girivaradari Yasodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Panachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Palapa Girivaradari Yasodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Panachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Panachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Kishore Kishori ki jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Marani ki jai, Gonitai ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this morning we're reading from Canto 10, chapter 60, and the text is 35. Satyam Vayat Iva Gunabhya Urukramantaha Shete Samudra Upalembana Matra Atma Nityam Kad Indriya Ganai Krita Vigrahastam Tvatsevakari Nirpapadam Vidhu Tam Tamo Nidam Satyam Vaya Divagunabhya Urukramantaha Shete Samudra Upalambana Matra Atma Nityam Kad Indriya Ganai Krita Vigrahastvam Jyat Sevakari Nirpapadam Vidutam Tamo Nitam Satyam Vayad Iva Gunabhya Urukramantaha Shete Samudra Upalambana Matra Atma Nityam Kad Indriya Ganai Krita Vigrahastvam Tvatsevakari Nirpapadam Vidhutam Tamo Nidham Please chant. Satyam Vayadiva Gunebhya Urukramantaha Vete Samudra Upalambana Matra Atma Nityam Kad Indriya Ganai Krita Vigrahastvam Tvatsevakari Nipapadam Vidutam Tamo Nidham Satyam Vayadiva Gunebhya Urukramantaha Tete Samudra Upalambana Matra Atma Jyam Kad Indriya Ganai Krita Vigrahastvam Jatsevakari Nirpapadam Vidutam Tamo Nidham Jam Vayadiva Gunabhya Urukramanta Sete Samudra Upalambana Matra Atma Nityam Kad Indriya Ganai Krita Vigrahastvam Tvatsevakayarnirpapadam vitutam tamonitam. And the word for word, satyam, true, bayat, out of fear, eva, as if, gunebhya, of the material modes, urukrama, O you who perform transcendental feats, anta, within, sheta, you have lain down, samudra, in the ocean, upalambana, matra, pure awareness, atma, the supreme soul, nityam, always, kat, bad, indriya ganai, against all the material senses, krita vigraha, battling, tvam, you, tat, your, sevakai, by the servants, nirpa, of a king, madam, the position, vidutam, rejected, tamaha, darkness, antam, blind. And the translation for text 35 is as follows. This is Rukmini speaking. Yes, my lord Urukrama, you lay down within the ocean as if afraid of the material modes, and thus in pure consciousness you appear within the heart as the supersoul. You are always battling against the foolish material senses, and indeed, even your servants reject the privilege of royal dominion, which leads to the blindness of ignorance. And the purport. In text 12, Lord Krishna said, Rajabhyo Vipayataha Subru Samudram Samanam Gatan. Out of fear of the kings, we took shelter in the ocean. Here, Srimati Rukmini Devi points out that the actual rulers of this world are the gunas, the material modes of nature, which impel all living beings to act. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti points out that because Lord Krishna fears that his devotee will come under the influence of the modes of nature and become entangled in sense gratification, he enters the internal ocean of their hearts, where he remains as the omniscient supersoul. Upalambana matra atma. Thus, he protects his devotees. The word upalambana matra also indicates that the Lord is the object of meditation for his devotees. In text 12, Lord Krishna also said, Balavadbihi krita dveshan. We created enmity with the powerful. Here, Srimati Rukmini Devi points out that it is the material senses which are actually powerful in this world. The Supreme Lord has taken up the battle against sense gratification on the part of his devotees, and thus he's constantly trying to help them in their struggle for spiritual purity. When the devotees become free of unwanted material habits, the Lord reveals himself to them, and then the eternal loving relationship between the Lord and his devotees becomes an irrevocable fact. In the same verse, Krishna stated, Tyakta nirpasanan. We renounce the royal throne. But here, Srimati Rukmini Devi points out that the position of political supremacy in this world usually implicates so-called powerful leaders in darkness and blindness. As the saying goes, power corrupts. Thus, even the Lord's loving servants tend to shy away from political intrigue and power politics. The Lord himself, being completely satisfied in his own spiritual bliss, would hardly be interested in occupying mundane political positions. Thus, Srimati Rukmini Devi correctly interprets the Lord's actions as evidence of his supreme transcendental nature. Om Jnana-timirandasya Gyananjana-shalakaya Chakshurinmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopistam Stapatam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shriuta Padakamlam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragutam Vitam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vitam Cha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bando Jagat Pate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radha Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimata Ramapada Swami Iti Namine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimata Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So it emerged in the purport and indeed in examining the commentary of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur that he connects the statements of Rukmini to the statement made by Lord Krishna, and there's constant reference to text 12, to whom she's giving a response. And in particular, in this particular text, she's focusing on the response to what Krishna had uttered in that particular text, text 12. So that particular statement on the part of Lord Krishna had been, this is what he actually said, so I'm quoting, "Terrified of these kings, O lovely browed one, we took shelter in the ocean. We have become enemies of powerful men, and we practically abandoned the royal throne." And the Sanskrit for that was Rajabhya Vipayata Sabru Samudram Sharanam Gatan Palayad Bihi Krita Dveshan Prayastyakta Nirpasanam. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he echoes Lord Krishna. He says, out of fear of the kings, we took shelter in the ocean. So, from Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti's perspective, he then gives the response of Rukmini. So he's utilizing his words to say what Rukmini is responding to Krishna's, that particular statement of Krishna, that out of fear of the kings, we took shelter in the ocean. And what Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the words he's using, this is Rukmini's response, "O Urukrama, most powerful one, it is true that actually you are fearless. You seem to have fear of the modes of nature," and that was the word gunabhyam, which are the actual rulers, Rajabhya, of this world, because they impel all living beings to act. Because you fear that your devotees will come under the influence of these modes of nature and become entangled in sense gratification, you enter the internal ocean of their hearts and remain as the omniscient supersoul. That's the phrase Upalambana Matra Atma, the omniscient supersoul, to protect your devotees. So this is Rukmini's response to Krishna, seemingly expressing that he was fearful of other kings, and hence he fled and he fled to the ocean and created his own city underwater. So she's giving a different view, responding to him. And in her view, She's identifying the ocean that the Supreme Lord had entered as being actually the material ocean of the heart of all his devotees. um, so she's seeing Krishna as having entered not the physical ocean where he constructed the city of Dwarka, but rather that he's entered the internal ocean of the heart of each and every devotee. And this is corroborated actually by Srila Sutta Goswami. So in the early part of Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Sutta Goswami, he's summarizing the introduction to Srimad Bhagavatam, and he says this: the super soul enters into the bodies of the created beings who are influenced by the modes of material nature and causes them to enjoy the effects of these modes by the subtle mind. So that was in Canto 1, Chapter 2. So one can say that indeed in every one of the 8,400,000 species of life, each of those entities are actually enjoying the material world according to the desires of the subtle mind. So each and every entity has a subtle body in addition to their gross body. And according to the subtle mind, so the thoughts that are there of how enjoyment is to be got, then the gross material body is there to allow for that kind of enjoyment that's there present in the mind of that living entity. And Srila Prabhupada explains it this way: the gross material body is based on the conditions of the subtle mind, and the senses are created according to the desires of the living being. So it's very interesting. It all begins with the subtle desires present in the mind. So then that creates the gross body, and also the particular kind of senses are created according to those desires. And continuing, the Lord as Paramatma helps the living being to get material happiness because the living being is helpless in all respects in obtaining what he desires. Very interesting, isn't it? I mean, so often you hear somebody say something like, I really wanted whatever it is, and somehow it came to me, and they're so surprised somehow. So this is that statement and explanation being given by Srila Prabhupada that actually Paramatma, the Lord as Paramatma, is actually helping the living beings to get their material happiness because actually they're helpless. They've got the body, they've got the senses, they've got the desire to enjoy, but it's actually Paramatma who sort of gives some inspiration that helps for those desires to get fulfilled. So he's actually helping the particular entities to get their material happiness. And Srila Prabhupada uses the phrase, he proposes and the Lord disposes. You know, that famous verse. So now Rukmini gives a reason for the Lord actually entering into the internal ocean of the hearts of the devotees. And it's very interesting the reason she gives. She says that it's out of fear that his devotees will become entangled in sense gratification due to the influence of the modes of material nature. So here on the one hand, you have this explanation that the super soul, or Paramatma, is entering into the heart of every living being in every single species in life in order to permit them to get their material happiness. And here Rukmini is explaining that actually he specifically is entering, so in a more conscious interaction with the individual soul in order to help to protect them from wanting to go the route of trying to enjoy their senses. So very interesting. It's he's functioning in a different way with the devotee. So this is Rukmini's explanation of, I mean, she puts it broadly that that's why he enters in the first place. So it's a different perspective. And she even puts it that actually he does so because he's fearful. You know, he's got to be there to protect his devotees, to actually not have them go the route of wanting to enjoy their senses. And usually and it's mentioned that there's understanding that naturally every single being is impelled by their particular way of being to go the route that the senses are dictating. So that's that idea that you're influenced by the modes of material nature. So you already have a certain being, the body's already constructed a certain way, and the senses are such that you'll get a chance to enjoy according to how your subtle desires and your mind is dictating. So naturally, you'll be impelled to go according to how your being is pushing you to function. But Rukmini is saying that Paramatma is there specifically to prevent this kind of going the route of the way one's being is pushing one to go, which would be just the sort of, on a gross level, following the way the senses were designed to operate based on the subtle desires in the mind. So how to reach this particular understanding? That Rukmini's understanding, I mean, one wonders, how does one get to that understanding? And there's a very interesting explanation given by Lord Kapiladev to Devahuti, where he explains something of how Rukmini comes to this understanding. And he's not referencing Rukmini, but it gives us some insight of coming to this understanding. And this is what Lord Kapiladev says. Through devotion, detachment, and advancement in spiritual knowledge acquired through concentrated devotional service, one should contemplate the supersoul as present in this very body, although simultaneously apart from it. And that's coming from the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the 26th chapter. So, this is pointing to how it is that one can actually understand that the supersoul is in a very specific way assisting the devotee to not go down the route that the senses are dictating or the subtle desires in the mind are dictating. And notice it's quite broad, but it gives the broad outline. There has to be devotion, detachment, so meaning detachment from what the body is wanting, detachment from what the mind is dictating, detachment from where the senses, how the senses want to enjoy, and advancing in spiritual knowledge at the same time. And all of it takes place just through concentrated devotional service. So it means, in a very regulated, specific, focused way, one is performing devotional service. So this is how one can come to that understanding that Rukmini is expressing. This very personalized assistance that Supersoul gives to devotees. And Srila Prabhupada spells out the position of Supersoul in general. And this is how Srila Prabhupada explains something of the position of Supersoul. Although sitting in the same body as the individual soul, the Supersoul has no affection for the body. Whereas the individual soul does. So you can see the different positions taken by the presence of the individual soul and the super soul residing in the same heart. The individual soul is very affectionate, connected to one's body, but the super soul doesn't have that affection for the body. In fact, no affection for the body. And this is Srila Prabhupada explaining something of this position of super soul or Paramatma. One has to detach himself, therefore, from this material body, discharging devotional service. Because you want to be aligning yourself with how the super soul is seen and functioning. So if the individual soul is naturally attached to the body and the super soul is not, one wants to align oneself with super soul, therefore one wants to become detached from the body. So you're on the same page, so to speak. And this is done through discharging devotional service. As Srila Prabhupada says, one has to detach himself, therefore, from this material body, discharging devotional service. So Rukmini has made a most wonderful statement. I mean, truly a wonderful statement. That the Lord has entered and remains in the ocean of the heart of the devotee. Since he fears the devotee will be swayed by the modes towards sense gratification. And Srila Prabhupada explains that when one is detached from the attraction of material prosperity, one can actually concentrate his mind upon the super soul. So there's the criterion. To actually concentrate one's mind on the super soul. So instead of the mind having its subtle desires and wanting to use the senses to be able to satisfy those desires, there has to be some detachment, particularly from the attraction towards material prosperity. Notice. So one's actually part of that functioning of being so attached to one's body, the individual soul, oneself, being attached to one's body, is very much interconnected with wanting material prosperity. One wants to be very comfortable, and have all the necessary objects. I mean, I notice this for myself. Sometimes when I'm walking around my home, I think every single object I've got there, I actually really like. I really like each and every object. It has some significance to me. It was at a certain part in my life, a certain way of viewing things, a certain connection to my history in this lifetime. And, and it gives a sense of comfort because it's related to the body, the culture of the body, the particular predisposition to the aesthetics of something related to the culture one is from. So the criterion that needs to be met to allow one to actually concentrate one's mind upon the super soul is to become detached from the attraction of material prosperity. So, one can look at those same objects, but actually one knows where one wants to move towards. And that is that kind of detachment from a need for that kind of comfort. Because one wants to concentrate one's mind on the super soul. So Srila Prabhupada, he reiterates, and these are Srila Prabhupada's words, one cannot concentrate one's mind and intelligence upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his partial representation, super soul, as long as the mind is distracted towards the material. And just putting it in parentheses, that detaching oneself from material contamination or this attraction towards the material, it's automatically achieved by devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So you don't have to, beat yourself, try and take your subtle mind and bash it, although we do have Srila Bhaktisiddhanta suggesting that that can be done with a shoe. Sometimes you read that, but the main thing is that just through performing devotional service, some service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead with a mood of devotion, wishing to please, it automatically allows for this detachment from that sense of wanting material comfort. So it's very subtle. Now, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in his commentary, he also continues. These are his words. Krishna may object. What is the proof that I reside there? So he may object to Rukmini's statement and actually ask the question, what's the proof that I reside in the internal ocean of the hearts of the devotees? So Krishna may pose that question. So Srila Vishwanath states that this question is answered by the statements of Lord Brahma. And he particularly quotes Napaishi Hridayam Bharat Svapumsam. And that is, for your pure devotees, you are never separated from the toes of their hearts. So, and notice the toes of their hearts, meaning Super Soul is present in his beautiful form in the heart. So actually, the individual soul is worshipping the toes of Paramatma, the Super Soul. And so devotees in a state of great purity, they're never separated from the toes of the Super Soul in their hearts. So this statement on the part of Lord Brahma is as follows. So this is actually what Lord Brahma says, and it comes from Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto, 9th chapter. O my Lord, persons who smell the aromas of your lotus feet, carried by the air of Vedic sound through the holes of their ears, accept your devotional service. For them, you are never separated from the lotus of their hearts. That's how Lord Brahma explains it. So notice this, how actually there's some reference of the senses. And so great is the concentration of devotees in a state of extreme purity that actually they can smell the aroma of the lotus feet of the Super Soul. And the reason they can smell it is because they're using their sense of hearing about the lotus feet of the Lord. So actually the hearing coming through the holes of the ears allows them to actually smell the aroma of the lotus feet of the Lord. So it says that aroma is carried by the air of Vedic sounds entering through the ears. So, and for this reason, these devotees are never separated from the lotus of their hearts. So the lotus of their hearts is Super Soul. They're never separated. So that's how Lord Brahma explains this particular question that Krishna may ask, what's the proof that I reside in the hearts of the devotees? And here's Lord Brahma actually directly stating it. So this paints the picture of the transcendental relationship between the Lord and his devotee. The Lord doesn't wish to be separated from the heart of these devotees. Says he doesn't want to be separated from the heart of the devotees. And Srila Prabhupada puts it this way. this paints, yeah, this paints a transcendental relationship between the pure devotee and the Lord. Such pure devotees are, these are Srila Prabhupada's words, no mundane sentimentalists, but are factually realists because their activities are supported by Vedic authority because of having given oral reception to the facts mentioned in the Vedic literature. So notice, everything hinges on actually hearing and receiving Vedic knowledge from the literature, the transcendental literature. And because of this, there's that relationship between the devotee and Paramatma in the heart. And particularly, Srila Prabhupada's pointing to the fact it's not a sentimental kind of relationship. Sometimes you hear persons being very sentimental. Like immediately it brings to mind because I grew up with a father who was very sentimental. And why I called him sentimental was he would say, I love my children, but should you ask him for something that required parting with a very cherished material object, oh no, you can't have that. So, and it was a material object that really you could easily have parted with. But then I realized it's a sentimental person who expresses, I love my children, but when it comes to parting with something that's special to him, no, the object comes first. So this idea that it's not a sentimental relationship with Super Soul. They're actually have a factual understanding of the Supreme Personality of God. It's because they're actually hearing from the Vedic literature. And one of the facts that is repeated in the Vedic literature is that the personal form of the Lord is worshipped in meditation as Super Soul. So it's a factual thing. And Srila Vishwanath continues in his commentary. So he says this. So Rukmini says, as the super soul and the term Atma or Paramatma, you are perceived in terms of the, and I think the phrase, and I hope my computer sometimes changes things, madras, sense objects, namely taste, form, sound, and touch. Your transcendental beauty and other qualities are perceived by your devotees through meditation. In other words, and that phrase upalambana matra indicates that Krishna is the sole object of meditation for the devotees. So this is the next thing that Rukmini is pointing to. That actually, through meditation, the devotee is actually able to perceive the transcendental beauty of Super Soul. They're actually able to utilize taste and form and sound and touch because they're hearing from the Vedic literature. So just like that, Lord Brahma is stating that the very purified devotee can actually smell the aroma of the lotus feet of Super Soul. So there's a description of the form of the Lord that one can concentrate one's mind upon. Because it's not possible to concentrate one's mind on anything that's void or impersonal, like an emptiness. How can you concentrate your mind on an emptiness? And, I'm just going to comment. Yesterday, in thinking about this class, I listened to, when I was in my early 20s, I had different books on yoga, and I remember there was one famous yogi, I guess in the 70s, and yesterday I saw a very old recording of this yogi speaking, black and white, and he was trying to explain how you meditate. And all he could really come down to was just, you've got to practice breathing exercises. After trying to say so many odd things that it was difficult to make sense of, he finally had to say, well, you meditate through breathing. So, or controlling your breathing. So Lord Kapila describes this object of meditation, because you have to have an object for meditation. And this is what Lord Kapila Dev describes. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has a cheerful, lotus-like countenance with ruddy eyes like the interior of a lotus, and a swarthy body like the petals of a blue lotus. He bears a conch, disc, and mace in 3 of his hands. So that's Lord Kapila Dev. And I'm referencing Lord Kapila Dev because somehow everything was very much connected to this topic. So it's from the 3rd canto, the 28th chapter. So that's the object of meditation. There has to be a very clear description so that it can help one to fix one's mind. And particularly on Super Soul, because that is what Rukmini is pointing to. And Srila Vishwanath continues that in text 12, Krishna also said, Balavadbihi krita dvesham, which translated is, we created enmity with the powerful. And so naturally we know that there were so many kings that were opposed to Lord Krishna, and particularly his stealing Rukmini. And there's a listing even of the names of the various kings, Jarasandha, Salva, etc. But here Rukmini replies to Lord Krishna's statement, and that's in this verse today. It is the material senses which are actually powerful in this world. So she's disagreeing with Lord Krishna. You take up the battle, and the words that were used were krita vigrahas, against sense gratification. And the sense gratification was the indriya ganai on the part of your devotees. So she's actually looking on a much more subtle level. So Krishna is saying, he opposed or created enmity with various kings. But Rukmini is actually saying, actually, you taking up the battle with the material senses, because actually the most powerful thing in this world is not the rulers of the world, it's actually material senses. It's material senses that are actually powerful in this world. So, and then she continues, and thus you constantly try to help them, the devotees, in their struggle for spiritual purity. So this is such incredible insight on the part of Rukmini. And Srila Prabhupada notes that when one's mind is fixed on the superior nature, he has no alternative but to follow the dictation of the Supreme. And the basic tenet there is that the mind must admit to some superior dictation and follow it. It's a natural thing in the mind. It has to admit to some superior dictation. The effect of controlling the mind is that one automatically follows the dictation of Paramatma, or Super Soul. And there's the example given by Dhruva Maharaj. Oh, I'm going a little over time, I'm surprised. I don't usually. There's an example of Dhruva Maharaj being advised to meditate on the Supreme Spiritual Master. So that Supreme Spiritual Master is the Super Soul who helps from within. And this is what Dhruva Maharaj was told. After sitting on your seat, practice the 3 kinds of breathing exercises, note breathing exercises, and then gradually control the life air, the mind, and the senses. So it sounds very similar to what I was hearing this yogi, this impersonal yogi saying. Uh, and Dhruva Maharaj has been told, completely free yourself from all material contamination and with great patience begin to meditate on the Supreme Personality of God. So that's the missing part. As a personist and taking into account Rukmini's very personal view that Krishna has entered a super soul to assist the devotee. This is also something that Dhruva Maharaj has been told, after being told to, practice control of his breathing and controlling his life air. It would bring control of the mind and the senses. But there's this additional thing. With great patience, begin to meditate on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's the 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the 8th chapter. So Srila Prabhupada notes, I'm almost done, notes that the process by which one gives up thought of material things is called pratyahara. And meditation means thinking of the Lord within. So unless one's mind is fixed, one cannot meditate. So there has to be either coming to this stage through Ashtanga Yoga, which is many impersonal yogis may recommend this, bringing the mind and the senses under control through breathing and controlling the life airs, or by the method recommended in the present age. And that method is constantly chanting the names of the Lord. So the goal is to meditate on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, one immediately concentrates on the sound vibration and thinks of the lotus feet of the Lord. And through continuing to chant, gradually the mind becomes absorbed in thought of the Lord. So finally, this is the last part of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary. Rukmini continues, in the beginning, the sadhaka realizes a little of your sweetness through meditation, but does not see you directly. It appears that you enter their hearts and go to sleep, as if out of fear of the sense objects. Notice how extraordinary it is. Her insight. It's as though Super Soul has gone to sleep because he doesn't want to have anything to do while the mind is thinking of sense objects. He's gone to sleep. But when the devotee's attachment matures and he conquers the enemy's senses, he loses his attraction for sense objects. Then you manifest yourself as if rising up from sleep. You become directly visible to the devotee and give him your full sweetness. At that time, the eternal loving relationship between you and your devotee becomes an irrevocable fact. So that's the interesting part. It's when one starts to lose attraction for sense objects. That's when Super Soul wakes up. And as though he's rising from sleep and becomes directly visible to the devotee. And Krishna describes this as well. He says, for one who has conquered the mind, so that's when, that attraction for sense objects that are there in the mind, the super soul is already reached, for he has attained tranquility. To such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same. And as Srila Prabhupada says, this state is practically samadhi or absorption in the Supreme. So it's a similar kind of state that's reached when that criterion is meant that one starts to push aside the attraction for sense objects and material comforts. That's when Super Soul wakes up. And Srila Prabhupada puts it that it's actually coming to that stage of complete absorption in the Supreme. And Srila Vishwanath ends with saying that Krishna states, we renounce the royal throne. And Rukmini responds, yes, that is quite proper. Your servants also give up royal positions and political posts because it gives rise to complete loss of discrimination. If they do so, what to speak of you? So she's agreeing with Krishna. He did a good thing. And Srila Vishwanath thus says, that by reference to the servants, it can be understood that the previous statements of this verse are in relation to Krishna's devotees, not the Lord. For Krishna does not fear or battle with the senses, but he does so in relation to the devotee. He is, in fact, the owner of all senses. So, since the devotee or the living entities are part and parcel of him, so the senses of the living entities are also part and parcel of his senses. So the Lord situated in the heart directs the senses of all living entities in terms of their surrender. And in the case of a pure devotee, he directly controls the senses. So this is looking at this particular verse, and if there's any thought to share or comment or sort of question, please go ahead. Sorry, I went a little over time. Somehow the purport or the commentary of Srila Vishwanath was rather long.
Thank you for your class, Mataji. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about how, with all being said about not being attached to the material energy or material things, how the devotee has to act in a way to lead persons on to understand their duty in society. So they have to almost accept everything for the mercy of for the service of the Lord, and show it good examples by rather than just rejecting everything and going off into the forest or whatever. They accept these things, not being attached to them, but as a way to show um, to show people how to live.
Well, your question has to do with the point being raised that becoming detached from material comforts or material objects is part of being what allows one to gradually meditate on the Supreme Lord. And so you were wondering, how does that look externally? Because after all, persons may be observing one in society, and you were saying that you would want to serve as an example of somebody who is moving in the direction, I guess, of wanting to meditate on Supersoul, since that was the topic. Um, so, since the underpinning of everything is that automatically that detachment is developing through performing devotional service, then obviously the thing one would be demonstrating more than anything is that one is also performing some practical actions that are directly in relation to the Supreme Lord. So without even going into philosophy or even the internal workings that I've tried to go into over here in this class, one would practically show that one performs an actual direct act of service to the Lord. So even walking to the temple is a direct action of service that is in devotion to the Lord. You have to actually utilize your body to take those steps to bring you to a physical structure within which the Lord is residing in his deity form. So even that simple thing will automatically help a person to get a little bit more detached, let's say, from deciding to walk to a place of intoxication or something, because just having performed that act, it's purified the heart, purified something of those desires, those subtle desires in the mind that has the person believing that they need to find enjoyment in a particular way. So that's a very good demonstration, a simple thing like that. Another one can be that uh, one has a certain, what should be the word, number of perishable items that can be put together into a dish that can then be placed before a picture of the Supreme Personality of Godhead um, before one is actually going to take that oneself. So the senses dictate that, you should just take, like a regular person, you just take something out of the refrigerator, an apple or something, and you start chewing it. But just demonstrating that that same object, you can actually wash it nicely, cut it nicely, put it on a little plate, put it before a picture of the Lord. It's actually going to have that same profound effect on purifying the desires that are there in the heart. So no more will that object be looked at as something that one just grabs mindlessly because the senses are dictating I must have that, but rather there's a little detachment that starts happening. Oh, I can first offer this to the Supreme Lord um, for his enjoyment. So those are two very simple things that can go such a long way to actually show someone how to actually perform a direct action of service to the Supreme Lord that will reflect well on oneself without even having to speak too much philosophy. Those are very basic things, like very external things that don't require too much comprehension, just requires a little bit of faith. But what a profound effect. So you don't have to demonstrate anything else. If just demonstrating those two things can be the beginning of incredible purification of the subtle desires in the mind and the senses. Thank you very much for bringing it up. So if there isn't anything else, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. And thank you very much for your kind attention. I'm most grateful. Srila Rampada Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ah!